and welcome to another edition of Veterans Forum. My name is Rebecca Jennings. I'm the Veterans Agent for the town of North Attleboro and Plainville. And today we have a special guest, and we actually have our guest that's going to talk to us about his military history. He's a World War II veteran, and he served in an interesting time in our history, and he just wants to come and talk to us about what he did in the military. So what is your name?
JoeArruda.
Arruda.
Arruda, yes.
And you live in Plainville, right?
Yes.
And you're one of our World War II veterans.
Yes, World War II.
And what years did you serve in the military?
I was in from Abraham Lincoln's birthday, February 12th, 1943, and I was discharged in January 16 and 46. So just 1 month short of 3 years.
Okay. And what branch did you serve in?
I served in the, it could be a little confusing, but it's Air Force. At the time I was actually serving, they would call it Air Corps.
Air Corps.
But it's still the Air Force. Everything was referred to the Air Force. And all my paperwork was all Air Force. But that was it. Was in the, from basic training in Miami Beach in the winter. So
you went to basic training in Miami Beach in the winter?
That was in February when we went.
Was it even cold?
Oh, it was nice. We stayed at the hotels as well. And naturally, we used to be subjected to white glove inspections where the officers.
Now, a lot of people in the audience don't know what white glove inspections are.
Yeah.
So white glove inspections, for those that aren't aware of it, it is where you have your higher command comes in and they make sure that your room, your beds, your equipment,
Door tops,
everything is clean, in its right place. You're not missing equipment. You're able to bounce a quarter off your bed.
Yeah.
Were you able to do that?
Yeah, well, I didn't see that, but they did a very thorough inspection of the whole area in Miami Beach. But we stayed there for a few months, and then I had...
Now, how long was your basic training?
Basic training? I'm not quite sure exactly how many months, but it was probably no more than 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
So, because I know it wasn't too long after that.
You went to your additional training for your job in the military, right?
I went to Arizona, Kingman, Arizona, and we did some gunnery training there. And from there I went up to Clovis, New Mexico for additional training. And,
now, how long were you in Arizona?
I'm not quite sure
Couple months?
how long, but it was months.
Yeah.
Going to all of these different places, at each place it wasn't very long.
Yeah.
Then we went up to Salt Lake City, Mountain Home, Idaho, and it came back to Salt Lake City, where I came down with tonsillitis.
Really?
Yeah. I came down with tonsillitis and was hospitalized for 1 or 2 days. But once I recovered, then I was sent to the high school in Salt Lake City to learn how to type. And
because that was a big part of your job. Now, what type of job did you have in the military? What was the name of your job?
At that time, I didn't have anything specifically assigned as to duties. It seemed like it was just training in general with some of the other fellows.
So they were just trying to prep you for what they wanted to figure out what they wanted you to do.
I really don't know what prompted them to pick me to go ahead and get any kind of specific training, but I assumed that I hadn't touched a typewriter at all at that point.
Your whole life?
No, I
So you didn't know how to type?
So I was sent to the high school, and there were a few other fellows along with me, but went to a high school in Salt Lake City to learn how to type. Well, I learned how to type in 2 or 3 weeks, I guess. The high school was a regular typing class where you had the keyboards with no
Okay.
letters on the keyboards.
Oh.
They pull down the shade up front, and there's your lineup of characters. So you had to learn by looking, which was very good in a way because it sunk in my head anyway,
Right.
where the characters were. Now, whether this was a pre-introduction to being able to type on coding machines, I'm not quite sure, but I had to use a typewriter.
In order to use the equipment that you had to use in the military, right?
Yes, right. It got up to about 32 words a minute.
Not bad, not bad.
So it was very good, but then the coding machine had a regular typing keyboard. And typing out the messages, you weren't typing out in English unless you were encoding messages, but decoding, the characters were all over the keyboard.
Okay.
X, Y, Z's and so forth. But some that you don't normally use very often when you're typing, but in encoding a message, and of course it's different. It was all English and so forth. But most of it was using this one piece of equipment that we referred to as ECM, electronic coding machine. And if you were to type in just cryptology or graphic, I'm forgetting what it is, but anyway, cryptology, there's a picture of the German coding machine, which is very similar to one that we were using.
Oh, okay.
It had certain rotors built into the equipment itself that would be used to set up a key for all messages. If the code was set up based on the code for the day, plus on messages, the first 2 characters were the key. First 2 groups of characters, I should say, were the key as to how the rotor should be set up in order for the rest of it to make sense. And there were, I think, 10 rotors or 8 rotors, I can't remember now. But there's just a series of rotors that once you start typing, then it would automatically encode a message or decode a message.
Now, when you were doing this, were you listening to someone, or how were you getting the messages so that you could
From the-
decode? Headphones?
On the island, we were set up in a separate building, which was built by the CBs. Part of it was blocked off to the coding machines, and the doors were always locked. Nobody could get in there unless they had a secret security.
Well, your job in
No,
the
but
military,
outside-
you had to have a secret clearance,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, and on the other side of the doorway was the radio operators. They would receive the message in code.
Okay.
And then that would be passed on to us behind locked doors, and then we would go through and decode the message.
Okay.
Or in
So
case-
it came into them, and then they would give it to you,
Really-
they would decode it.
Yes, the radio operators would receive the message, and then that in turn would be turned over to us behind locked doors to be able to go through and decode it into English. And the radio operators, as I say, were outside the room. They weren't even coming into the room. The officer in charge at that point, this was a joint communications group. It wasn't
Now,
just
after,
Air
so we'll back up a little bit. So after you left the States, you went where? Where did you go in order for you to start doing all the decoding?
From the very beginning, Oh.
Yeah, where did you end up going?
the places I went was Salt Lake City to the typing bit. From there, we went up to Seattle.
Okay,
And from Seattle, we went over to Hawaii.
okay,
I went to the island of Kauai. And we were there as just a big group. But while on the island of Kauai, I was selected to work in a joint Army-Navy group
okay,
that was separate from my main unit.
okay,
And I was transferred to the island of Oahu at the IEA Naval Barracks, where we would, in the form of collecting the group that was to remain as a joint Army-Navy group to do all the encoding, decoding of all the messages that would come in. We stayed there on the Oahu for, I don't know, a couple of months, I think. And then from there, then we went to the island of Agar. That's when we just, when we got to Agar, we hate to land on the beach. And we were on the beach for a couple of days and nights, sleeping on the beach in pup tents, because the rest of the island still had some Japanese on the island as well.
really?
So once it was cleared, then they went more inland and built the tent for us so that we could have someplace to work. And I'd say within a matter of a couple of days of landing on that island that we were operating, communicating by code, and that they eventually built a more permanent structure for us. And this is where we were working behind locked doors and so forth.
Yeah,
And the whole island was secure to the point where anyone walking around the island would be how they
Questioned?
said you would be approached, and that's like for passwords. And the password was something very simple. It was the make of any American automobile, so that we would be able to say.
because where you were at was really a top secret location where you were getting information from what was going on with the enemy, and they were communicating it through the talkers, who were in turn giving it to you to decode to give to the command, right?
Yes, we were the communication center for that whole area of the Pacific.
For the whole Pacific area.
Yes, in that is real close to the Philippines. And our planes, which were the B-24s, would be taken off from the island we were on and have their routine just bombing the airfields in the Philippines and some of the other islands around there. And the one thing is maybe a little sideline, but the island itself, when they landed, didn't have a runway. So the Seabees had to build a runway. And in the process, they were planning to use some steel mats for the runway.
Really?
They're on soft dirt. They use these steel mats that they would put on the runway. Well, it turned out that the island was coral, all coral, so it's like a big rock in effect.
Right.
But once they bulldozed the whole place, they wouldn't need those steel mats.
Right.
And those are steel mats that they CBs welded into benches for us for an outdoor movie.
They did.
And anyway, yes, they weren't very soft to sit on, but it was. We used to have these ponchos that we carried around with us anyway, and we just to fold them up and use those as
Cushion.
something to sit on.
Yeah.
Which has made it a little comfortable, at least from.
Now, did you have any snacks when you were looking at the movies?
We had these ponchos,
Yeah.
and actually they served two purposes. One was a couch, a cushion,
Yeah.
and the other thing was that if it rained, well, we could just take out the cushion, open it up, and.
Were you watching the movie when it was raining outside?
Outdoor movie. Oh, it was an outdoor.
Oh, it's outdoor.
Movie. Yeah, and let's see, the CBs had built the bench seats out of these steel mats that would have gone to the runway.
Okay.
And they also built the stage with the Quonset shelter kind of thing, strictly outdoors. The movie, where the cameras were, they had a little booth, you might call it, built on stilts. And we used to watch some up-to-date movies at that
Yeah.
time.
What type of movies? Do you remember what type of movies you saw?
I was trying to think of one the other day, and I couldn't think of it. There was it wasn't Gone with the Wind, but it was another one at that kind of level of movie. But I don't think we'd have a movie every night, but we did have some occasional.
Just something to do because all you were doing is decoding and working and,
Yeah.
something else to do besides working all the time.
Right, but encoding, decoding messages was our main thing
Yeah.
on the island, and it wasn't just straight decoding. That many times the operators might miss a couple of characters in receiving, and the coding machine was very sensitive to the point that as you're typing out, you're typing just a group of characters that don't make sense to begin with. You're
Right.
typing out so you don't realize that something is missing until what comes out of the machine is not English.
Oh.
So we would have to do a little troubleshooting to determine if there were characters missing, where the characters were. And then if that were the case, then we'd have to request that the sender would send the same characters again, then they would receive it. The thing is that every time you sent the message out, you would have to encode it. You wouldn't send it just an English request to begin with.
Okay, yep.
You'd have to encode the requesting message, and then when they would send it back, they would also encode the missing characters, and then we would have to retype it in there and so forth. Well, it was a little troubleshooting to make sure that we got the whole message, and it worked out pretty well that way. Yeah. But any message that we had coming in was classified as top secret. I wasn't authorized to handle it, but from the setup of the message as it came in, we would know that it was a top secret message, and we would call the officer of the day.
Okay, and they would
And
come in and
He would
decode
come
it?
in and he would handle the decoding of the message and take it.
But it would say, when it was coming in, it would say top secret, so that you knew that you had to get somebody higher.
Yeah, we knew
to read
that he would come in, and so the officer in charge was usually a Navy officer. And at the end, I didn't realize that when I got home and started looking at some of the stuff there, he had also put in his commendation on the service that we perform in their coding, decoding messages. But he was a Navy officer, and very, very pleasant. But generally, we handled 95% of the messages that would come in. Mm-hmm. And there were 3 different pieces of equipment that could be used to create messages. The most complicated one was this ECM, the electronic coding machine. Another one was what they referred to as an M209, which is a handheld unit that the fellows in tanks would use, and they would strap it to their knee to prevent it from running all around the place. And they would set up the code that way. That used a different set of key characters because it was a different machine and they could only do so much. And then another simple version was strip. We had a little stand with a means of being able to have these paper strips with characters printed on it.
Okay.
It just slide them right in a position. And depending on what the code key was, what they would put the strips would be positioned in a certain area.
Really?
So that
Okay.
you could read vertically down to get the message.
Okay.
And I was looking through my iPad one day, and I read where a system similar to that was used by Julius Caesar that long ago.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, what they would
And
have
they're still using it.
was a key, and the key indicated how much of a distracted or displacement, I should say, so that the strips, if the key was, say, number 3, for example, that would mean that the second strip was down 3 characters over, and the line that you would read would be in someplace else. I'm not sure of the specifics, but that was, we were using similar to that.
That's pretty amazing.
But those were messages that were not secret. They were more, well, I can't say it, not secret anyway.
Yeah.
They were not that important to be coded. So it was used, it was very seldom though. It was a pain in the neck to use it because of what we had to do with it. But beyond that, the ECM was the most important equipment. The picture in iPad or on a cell phone as well shows these rotors that we could manually rotor them. There's characters on the outside of the rotors, so that setting up the key, once all those rotors were in position, then you could type out. If you're decoding, you just type out all the characters. And if you're not that good at typing, you would have to really understand it because the characters were random. You never knew what it was, and you just have to type. And you use practically the whole key because you don't know what letters are coming out when it's coded.
Right.
When it's coded, it's just a coded group of characters. But other than that, I found that it was very interesting. To me, I like the challenge. If we missed a character or a number of characters, to go back and say, okay, now where do we go? and we would eventually get the whole message. But it was challenging to the fact that you had to know where the characters were, which ones to move back, and
Right.
it get complicated for a while.
So if you had a favorite memory to share with the audience, what would that memory be?
When we landed on the beach, so we had to remain on the beach for a couple of days and sleep there
Yeah.
with little pup tents. Well, we didn't realize it at that time when we were sleeping that there were land crabs. And I mean land crabs that would roam the area, and one fella had his toe being exposed, he drew blood. One of
Oh
them.
my
So with
goodness. From the crab biting it?
the crabs, yes. We had enough to the point where after the first night, we each had a hammer or something handy. So they were
That's awesome.
around there. We wanted to make sure we had some weapons. So we were glad to get back to, this is 16 by 16 tent, the standard size,
Yeah.
where at least there was a cot. We could sleep on the cot. But yeah, we had to protect our feet to make sure they weren't exposed. But other than that, to me, it seemed like a normal thing to do by just doing what we had to do.
Right.
And it was, to me, it was very interesting work. I always like some challenge to the point. One thing that developed from the fact that when things were slow behind locked doors, I'd go out and listen to the radio operators sending code and so forth, to the point where once I was discharged and back home, I had the opportunity to learn code. So I did. I learned code, and I got my license. Now I have the extra class license, and the challenge there got me to start thinking about programming for equipment, so forth.
Okay.
And it was very interesting as far as understanding the languages that were available for coding, and to the point that I eventually got to do some coding, programming for equipment, test equipment, to make the equipment work, do that. So that was a challenge for me once I got out, that between the coding and the programming, it kept me busy. I would like to see it the way it was working, the fact that once the program started working, I could see the equipment moving and so forth. Mm-hmm. Except for one time, I had a little glitch in the program, and when I looked at the printer, the sheets was coming out. Nothing on them, you know. The sheets, it was just a glitch in the program, so that it kept printing. Yeah. The whole place was covered with sheets. But it's things like that I like to get interested in what made it tick.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show and telling us all about your military history. That was fantastic, and I enjoyed hearing it. Thank you so much. Yeah. I want to thank you for tuning in to Veterans Forum today, and stay tuned. We'll be interviewing some more veterans that have military history. If you're interested in coming on the show and talking about your military history, feel free to reach out to me and call my phone number in my office. I'd be happy to talk with you. Thank you and have a great day.